Thomas should be logging in right about now. He just got out of his class. Good afternoon and welcome to Trinity University's Expert Series webinar. I'm Carla Sierra, Public Relations Manager for Trinity's Strategic Communications and Marketing Department. Today's topic is developing intercultural capacity, a look at interactive global education, in which we will look at how collaborative international learning, COIL, can help students develop valuable life skills and attitudes that will help them forge a path in an ever more globalized workforce. Our guests today are Dr. Katsuo Nishikawa Chavez, the Director for Trinity's Center for International Engagement, Dr. Dante Suarez, Associate Professor of Finance and Decision Sciences in the School of Business Administration, Savannah Clarke, a recent 2020 Trinity Economics graduate who is now working toward her master's degree in Trinity's Department of Healthcare Administration, and Thomas Kasierski, who is a finance major and will be graduating this May. So let's go ahead and get started. Dr. Suarez, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. How can study abroad and the COIL opportunities change the worldview?
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Carla. It's a great honor to be here. And I want to tell you that I think in international education, I'm sometimes trying to follow what happened in my own life. I grew up in Monterrey, Mexico, and I had family here in San Antonio. And as I grew up crossing the border many times, I felt like I was international. I felt like I understood how the world worked and how different people around the world were. And it wasn't only until I was an adult and I got an opportunity to travel further to Europe originally, that it made me realize that all of this richness of humanity is out there without our knowledge. The kind of education that we offer at Trinity and what higher education should be all about is a transformational opportunity for students who really have an opportunity to become somebody else when they come to college. And so whenever I have somebody in my office talking about, hey, Dr. Suarez, I'm interested in the opportunity of maybe studying abroad, I'm always trying to push them really, really hard on doing it. At Trinity, we really encourage study abroad opportunities in the School of Business where I'm at. Everybody has to take the 4th semester of a language in international business as a major. You have to take the 5th semester of a language, study abroad and such. And what I tell my students is, look, it might be that while you're studying abroad, you then learn more about yourself and you come to the knowledge that you always will want to live in the United States, but you will make that decision as somebody who understands why you want to live in the United States for the rest of your life. So when you go abroad, you get to imagine who you could have been had you been born in a different country. And I think having that opportunity to kind of burst your bubble in that way will forever stay with you and give you the sense of what it is to be somebody else. Obviously, we'll always just be ourselves. But as we're interacting with other people in our lives, and particularly in the workplace, having this opportunity of like, well, I remember who I was when I lived in Spain, right? I remember myself as a different person, allows us to have a much deeper sense of empathy when we're interacting with people that are different. So today, we're also going to talk a little bit about what we've been able to do at Trinity to try to push these experiences, even though we can't really travel abroad these days.
Excellent. And Dr. Chavez, how does working in international teams help improve our intercultural capacities?
It's a really interesting question, right? Because this idea of an intercultural workforce, it's one of the most talked about qualities that the people that hire our students are asking us to produce, right? The business is very pragmatic in the way that they operate, right? I'm a political scientist by training, and so the world of politics and the world of business overlap in some ways, but something that's very Texan and I think very real about the business world is that they're pragmatic, right? If it affects the bottom line, it's something that's going to have to change. And I think corporations around the world, here in the US, see that both the US market and the international market as a place that is diverse, right? So for sure, the international market by definition, and the US, the growth and different populations has made the US a very vibrant multicultural society. So that ability for our students to be effective when they work in a group, that they, that they don't commit the mistakes maybe that somebody who had a lack of opportunities, right? I'm thinking of somebody who had a very insular experience growing up, that hasn't been given the opportunity to even travel within the US, or to work with people that are different than their own. They're at a great disadvantage, and they also are less effective as co-workers, as teammates, and as people that can interact with possible customers and or be a good service provider. So in any aspect of our life, we know, because it's baked into the demographics of the country, and the future only points in one direction, that we will be working in an ever more interconnected world, right? I heard this growing up in a small town in Savannah, right? And on the Baja Peninsula, that people told me like, oh, you're going to work on the global stage. Like, yeah, right. And now I speak English on a daily basis. I interact with people from Italy and France and Japan and all sorts of places. And it's that, and it's part of our responsibility to best prepare our students for this world. And it's one of the tools that students are going to have in their toolkit, how to be effective in an intercultural, international team. We will be creating and making things, coming up with solutions in intercultural teams. And there's no stopping that.
And if I may add to that, right, like it's not only the internationality aspect of things. When you study abroad, or when you have one of these online international experiences, you get to see the other, right? Like, and that's a very easy way of accessing it. But as Katsuo was saying, it's very important to recognize that we ourselves in the United States are a very diverse society. And we can think about many different aspects of that diversity, right? Not only the racial diversity that we talk about a lot, but also intergenerational diversity, different sexes, different types of upbringings and sociocultural backgrounds. These days, with a very politically divided country, understanding the other is essential. And there's a lot of research out there that shows that having a diverse team helps you solve problems much more effectively than anybody can do individually. So throughout our lives, we're going to be working with people that are very different from us, and having the opportunity to see yourself as a different person when you study abroad, I think gives you that permanent sense of being able to learn how to understand, how to put yourself in the position of others. I also heard research of babies that hear more than one language in their first year of life. That aspect that allows us to learn language just naturally remains open. Whereas people that did not hear a second language growing up as infants, later on in life, they still can learn another language, but it goes to a completely different part of their brain. Whereas those people that kind of like grew up internationally in that way can continuously learn a new language and go to the same original storage unit that we have for learning language to begin with. So I think as our students in their young years have this opportunity to open up, to burst that bubble, this stays with you for life.
Excellent. So that being said, and some thoughts that have come to mind right now too, how will, and I'll ask Dr. Suarez or Dr. Chavez, how will the workplace of the 21st century look like after this COVID pandemic? I mean, right now, and that brings up a question that we have here, is your program currently, are students abroad right now? How is this working right now?
Right now, we don't have students abroad because of COVID. And we know that, right, like the transformation of the US workforce has greatly improved because of the diversity and gender and sex and also ethnicity. So think about that, right? Like the ability to tap on the expertise of people in India or in Mexico or in other places. And the neat thing about the international perspective is that it's a point of view that looks at it at the same problem from a different perspective. And many times our problems aren't solved, not because we don't have the technology, it's because we lack the imagination, right? So some of the biggest problems that we have, like, global poverty or climate change, right? We can see solutions, right? But somebody looking at this problem from another perspective can see other solutions. And it's that combination of solutions that I think are going to really, ramp up. It's going to be another accelerator of growth and of capacity to confront our problems with better, more effective solutions.
So
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No,
I was just going to echo what Katsuo was saying and say that the genie really is out of the bottle, and the world will never be the same after this pandemic. And I just want to reiterate this aspect, and I think it's a double-edged sword. Like, a lot of people are loving working from home. It gives us a lot of flexibility and so on. So that's great. But the labor force is now global, right? This is going to be a tougher market for all of us because if you can do it from home, so can somebody from India or China, right? And maybe for a tenth of the money that you were expecting to make. So this is going to be a big challenge. Another thing is that when you think about where is this company located, where is the marketing department of the company? It is everywhere, right? Like the marketing department of the company is with one person in Singapore, another person in Miami, and you name it, right? Like, so from now on, everything is going to be really, really global and really, really dispersed throughout the world, right? So having the opportunity in these COIL experiences of communicating with people different from you in a different part of the world that can give you a different perspective is exactly what we need to do with our students to prepare them for the workforce, the workplace of the 21st century. And let me just leave it as something that we can talk a little bit later this hour about the idea of interdisciplinarity, right? Like the kind of well-roundedness that we talk about, our students being the employers talk about how our students can see problems from many different perspectives. And now we can recognize that those problems cannot be solved by any disciplinary approach that looks at the issue within that silo, right? Like, so I like to think of our students being just well-versed in the liberal arts, having that very strong background, but also potentially having opportunities to do maybe an internship while they're studying abroad, so that they can also gain the practical knowledge that they'll need once they start their career. So bringing all of these things together, I like to tell my students that you guys are like, walking interdisciplinary teams. And I also want to talk about stressing the interdisciplinarity of the kind where we're combining things that are rooted in the liberal arts and humanities, sciences, with more professional programs like what we have at Trinity, engineering, computer science, healthcare administration, or everything in the School of Business.
And you brought up a good point about internships. So not just you were saying the students currently are not going abroad because they can't. So we've got two students on our panel today, and you and Dr. Chavez, the two of you have told me about. There was a video that you had shared with us, Dr. Chavez, from a collaborative program between us here at Trinity and students in Japan. And Dr. Suarez, you were talking about one at Tec de Monterrey. And Savannah and Thomas, I'm not sure, I'm assuming you were in one of those programs. Can one of you talk about that, either the students or one of the professors, how that worked? Because you studied internationally, but you were in the country, right?
Yeah, I can hop in. I was the Tec de Monterrey, and it was a semester long. I think fall 2019 is when I took it. And you're supposed to have a Spanish credit, but I kind of was like, hey, like I know Spanish, can I get in the class? So luckily I got in it. But it was a really, really amazing experience. It was doing business in Latin America, and I think it had a marketing kind of theme going on in it, but it was a whole business plan. That was our goal for the semester, is to find a way to export from either US or just in between different countries in Latin America. And so here we have a class of, I think we were 13, and we were paired with a class of about the same size around, or maybe a little bigger, in Tec de Monterrey, where we got the opportunity to connect with them, work with them on WhatsApp for the majority of the semester, kind of just like, oh, what do we want to sell? How can we do it? Doing like the research report of it. But we had the exchange twice in the semester. So we had one where we went to Monterrey and actually got to meet in public and work together in kind of a classroom, also exploring the city, just kind of having that bonding. And then we presented, that was like our preliminary pitch, which was a crazy experience for me because it was all in Spanish. And I never had that experience before. Like I could have a communication, like a conversation, but the actual presentation and like going over the pro forma, and I'm like, 2000, like I don't even know, but it was a good kind of humbling, but a good experience to kind of continue on my education with. And then after that preliminary, we kind of went back to working online, communicating with each other. And then they came to Trinity, and it was a chance for them to see San Antonio, to see the campus, and then get the final product out. But I think my experience working with, I think I had 3 students from Tec de Monterrey, and then I was the only Trinity. Just seeing a different work ethic, different ideas come, seeing how their background influenced their ideas, whatever they brought to the table. We actually ended up doing brownies. It was a brownie company from one of the girls' uncle. So we got to meet her uncle, go into a factory, see how they like worked. And I think above anything, it was just a really good experience. One, practicing my Spanish, and then also working with a completely different culture.
Excellent. Thomas, what program were you in?
Yeah, so I was in Dr. Suarez's international finance class, which was a lot of fun. And we had several projects within that were meant to give us practical experience working on the concepts from class. And one of those was effectively the same project that Savannah worked on, just from a different angle, I guess you could say. So we still were trying to come up with our own business plan. We were working with students from Monterey Tech, and rather than come up with the business plan and analyzing the environments related to the business and things like that, my role was to do a foreign currency analysis and determine where the best place to export our product to would be. So effectively, I was just coming at it from a different side of the coin than Savannah was at. This was last fall, so there were some complications involving COVID, but that gave me a bit of insight, I think, into what the international workforce in a post-COVID world would look like, if you want to put it that way. So involved Zoom meetings, trying to find the right platform for us to, keep in touch with each other as we did the project. And so I never actually physically met my teammates. It was all virtual, which was a really interesting twist on it. But it was a fantastic experience. I was just so amazed by the brilliance of my teammates and the ways that they supported me, and hopefully I supported them as well.
Very interesting. So go ahead.
I just want to point out that imagine if, you don't even have to imagine, right? We know that at job interviews, you always get thrown that kind of curveball, right? Like, are you ready to work with people from a different background? And a lot of students or potential job applicants will talk about, that, yeah, they can imagine themselves doing it. The cool thing here is that both Thomas and Savannah, they can talk about their experience of how they already have done this, right? And that's a really, I think, is something that sets them apart from other possible job candidates.
And you all had mentioned participating in internships, professors. So was this in a way an internship, or well, how is that this different from an internship or the class?
Yeah. So, okay. So let me take a step back. When we think about how do we prepare students for the international world, we think about three things: about knowledge, right? Things like geography, language spoken in different places, the political systems, currency, how to calculate currencies. That's the knowledge part, right? And then there's the attitudes and the dispositions. And the attitudes are emotional things. These are about, you're prepared, your ability to be prepared to, sometimes be shocked by things that are unexpected, and to be able to roll with these differences that are uncomfortable to you because, you're not used to it. It's not your forte yet. You have to have that strength of personality to not let that derail you, right? So, and that's a capacity, that's a skill that we talk about. And the other one is the attitude, that ability to kind of imagine yourself doing it and willingness to do it, right? There's a certain percentage of job opportunities for companies to expand to new markets that goes unfulfilled because companies themselves don't have the personnel to exploit these opportunities, right? And so we want to, plant a seed that kind of helps create that want when the students are finally, part of the professional world, that they'll raise their hand and say like, oh, I want to be sent to Argentina to open this job. I love that opportunity, right? That they would jump on those exciting opportunities. And so when you talk about internships, right, the internship kind of helps that, right? The internship, so it will teach students about the, how a business in Madrid works as compared to a business in San Antonio. But beyond that, right, it's those attitudes and skills that we're also teaching them. And what's neat about this project is it's a way of not doing an internship, or, in addition to an internship or outside of an internship, to start developing these skills. We think about this like kind of like a pool, right? Like the deep end and the shallow end. And so we want to get the students to want to do these what we will call high impact practices, things that we know because of research that really affect the outcome of students when they're in university. And we know that our students come from very different backgrounds. Some are ready to jump into the deep end like Savannah, and some need a gradual increase in challenge. And so for us, these COIL opportunities are that kind of, I know you've never done this. It is scary. It's asking you to do something that's way harder than in any other class, but try it, right? And it's done in a way that we are trying to maximize that positive experience so that they can do the next thing and the next thing, right? And so Thomas is soon to graduate, but if he had this experience as a first or second year, he would be like, oh, I made great friends with these kids in Monterrey. I want to go study there, right? Or I'm going to take that next opportunity that I have to do something like that.
If I may, Carla, just give a little bit of context to the audience of the two students that we have here. And I want to take the opportunity to thank them for taking some time out of their busy schedules. So Savannah had the opportunity to study abroad in one of the one program that we have for a whole semester of faculty-led program in Madrid, Spain, right? So we have a gamut of different types of study abroad programs, and in particular, faculty-led programs that do exactly what Katsuo was talking about, of giving students an opportunity to be abroad, right, completely on their own in some ways, but also to be within a posse of students from Trinity in a very well-curated experience that it has been made possible by professors who are really devoted to giving them the best possible experience, right? So Savannah had that opportunity, and then also participated in one of our LAC classes, languages across the curriculum. The class that I teach is called Doing Business in Latin America, and it's an international business course, but it's taught in Spanish, right? And so there we had this opportunity of doing COIL, collaborative online international learning. But that I refer to it as in-person COIL, because they could interact online in the semester. But then also because we are so close to the border and so close to Monterrey, the distance between San Antonio and Monterrey, which is, one of the largest cities in Mexico, is the same as between Dallas and San Antonio, right? Like, so it's crazy to think that we were that close. We feel like we know each other, and then in reality, we don't know each other. So within that COIL context, the students have the opportunity to visit each other, as Savannah was saying, right? Like, first, we got to go to Monterrey, and they got to present to a panel of judges the ideas that they were working on. And then when the students from Monterrey Tech come to visit us in San Antonio, we get to show them the city and maybe see our own city with different eyes, with their eyes, right? And so they present the final projects of the business opportunities that they're considering developing. Then the pandemic hit, and now we don't have those kinds of opportunities. So Thomas had the opportunity of working in my international finance class with a full-fledged just COIL model in which all that we were doing was working online. And one of the things that we try to do there, the professor from Monterrey Tech, Agata Michalska, and myself, was that so they were working on different aspects of bringing a product to somewhere in Latin America, right? Like, so the idea is that the students in the Monterrey Tech were experts in this and could find information in Spanish and so on, right? Like, so they were focused on doing what's called a peso analysis, right? Like, considering all of the aspects of taking that product into the new environment that they're going to. And my students in my international finance class were focused, as Thomas was saying, on the currency exposure aspects of the international business. But then when they made their final presentations all together in a Zoom call like this, they were forced to do them backwards. The students from Monterrey Tech had to explain the currency exposure, and the students from Trinity had to explain the peso analysis. So in there, embedded in the pedagogical model, they had to teach each other what they had learned in each other's classes. And that, I think, is a really, really important, really, really valuable critical thinking and just communication skill of being able to translate what you've learned in your class into relatively simple words, simple concepts, explain it to your peers on, abroad, and then hear your own words. I was super impressed with what the students were able to do. This was the first time that I did this. And in particular, Thomas, I think yours was one of the best projects. I really, really enjoyed it. So anyway, here we have an opportunity to see different types of models in which we do this study abroad, this internationalization of our campus that Dr. Nishikawa Chavez has been, like a stalwart of, like, just doing so many things in the last decade, including, for example, when Savannah was in Spain, we had an opportunity of meeting with students from the Catholic University in Salamanca, Spain. And we had such a good experience that they were like, well, we want to come visit you at Trinity. And Carla, you yourself hosted a student from that opportunity, right? Like, and for me, I still remember that trip of them just being around, because I was trying to herd cats, I was herding cats all the time, like, hey, we're in a hurry. And the students from Salamanca were just like, Dante, what's your hurry? We're here from the other side of the world. And they were laughing all the time, like in that week, I just learned that maybe I was taking myself too seriously sometimes, that I was too stressed, and that maybe we needed a little bit of Spanish in ourselves, like a little bit of like, calm down, enjoy life. This is the only life we have. So anyway, these are, I'm really glad that we got Savannah and Thomas here to give our audience a sense of the different ways in which Trinity is trying to achieve this internationalization.
I definitely learned that from my Spanish student when he was staying with my family. We decided to, because we wanted our sons, one of them who is now a first year here at Trinity and the other one's a junior in high school, to learn about another culture. And you're right, I just felt like I was always being rushed and everything. And Camilo was his name. He's like, Oh, we're fine, Carla. We're fine. Let's have our coffee. We'll be there. We'll get there. So I learned a few things too. You made me think of something when you guys were talking. So Thomas, you were in a class with Latin America, and Savannah said you already spoke Spanish. What if they don't speak the language? How do you get around that? Do you have to speak the language? How do you get to that point? Because it just seems like your classes are so interesting. You don't want somebody to miss out because there's a language barrier.
Yeah. You know, language is a really interesting thing, right? So I'm interested in hearing, you know, for example, Thomas's experience with this, because it wasn't a prerequisite that you had to speak Spanish for that class.
Yeah, so luckily for me, we communicated pretty much entirely in English. I took a couple Spanish classes at Trinity, and unfortunately, it's just not a skill I was personally able to develop, even though, you know, we've got a good system for that at Trinity. But I had another partner in my international finance class who did speak Spanish. He was a native speaker. And I know that the students from Monterey Tech really loved being able to talk with him in their native language. It just unlocked something in them. It was kind of a before and after moment where before, you know, they were very nice, very smart, very helpful. Then their faces just lit up when my partner started speaking their language. You know, something changed there. We forged this deeper connection that I found really surprising. I expected to like these people. I didn't expect to necessarily get along famously with them, but I did, even though I wasn't the person speaking Spanish. So they had to actually speak English throughout pretty much the entire thing. And they were so accommodating and frankly, really skilled at it too. One of the things that I think I talked about with Dr. Suarez was how in the written paper that we turned in after the presentation, their writing was better than mine. It really was. These guys are incredible. And I really lucked out having them in my group.
Dr. Chavez, you had mentioned before something that I'm going to ask you to explain, the importance of perspective and how we're making meaning of the world through all of this.
Yeah, so the people who study culture and study, you know, how the interaction between cultures, and there's some of this work is really fascinating because they go into the actual cognition of it, right? Like how is the brain processing information? And so what we know is that we have strong evidence that what we see is conditioned by our culture, right? And this is something which I think is really powerful because it also speaks to some of the problems that we have in our country with inter-race relations, okay? And so students can develop this ability by going abroad. And actually, they're also developing skills to be more effective here in the US, right? And so when we talk about teaching these skills, we use the language of effectiveness, right? We want people to be able to connect and to interact and to get their goals across, right? That's the essence of it. But with it, right, there's so many other things. Once connection and communication is established, you know, as Thomas is saying, friendships can develop, you know, empathy and a genuine care for the other. And so in the case of culture, what we know is that culture sometimes filters what we see, okay? And so it depends on a person's cultural perspective, what they'll see as offensive, non-offensive, as being rude or not rude, right? My brother works in the international field, and he was in a meeting, a presentation in Bangladesh, right? And his boss, before they went into the meeting, told him, you know, like Bangladesh, like this means yes in this culture, right? And he's like, okay. But he told me, I kept stopping because I thought they were shaking their head no. And he felt so self-conscious, right? And, okay, his boss telling him, just before they go into a meeting that that's a communication thing that he should be ready for is way too late, right? So we need to train students to be ready and to be comfortable, right? So that they, when the other group is going like this, and he felt like, like he was getting I don't know what you're saying. And so that tripped him up so much that he felt really ineffective in his ability to communicate, right? So that's a very simplistic way of just of communication. But when it comes to things about, speaking over each other, right? And for example, in my family, Spanish speakers, we speak over each other all the time and everybody's fine. But if you're in a culture that's a turn-taking culture, it's seen as very offensive or as very ingenuine, right? If you don't take
all the time.
Yeah, you see that? And if you don't take a pause before you say something, they're like, oh, you just thought about that, right? Some cultures expect you to take a pause. And so it's that ability to know that there's differences and that there's hidden communication happening, that you should at least be aware of it, right? And then you should also be capable of it working in those environments. And so that ability to kind of understand culture is one, at the top level. There's a second level to this, and then there's deeper levels of how people make meaning of the world and what they find valuable. So, our friends from Spain here, they were giving us a gift, right? For them, life is to be enjoyed, right? And they have many sayings, right? To the point that, their underlying thing is that you only have one life to live, and it has to be, enjoyed, right? There's, if they're religious, they'll tell you this is a gift from God, and you have to, honor that gift by taking, the small pleasures in life, like being with family, with friends, enjoying a glass of wine or a sip of coffee. And those are really neat things, right? That also can influence us. But at these deeper levels, right? There's ways of thinking about value. What are we valuing, right? And then when you're talking about trade or of international commerce or any interaction, these things, right, that we conceive of value in one way, the other group is conceiving it in another way. And if we're not aware of these differences, we are not talking at the same table, right? We're yelling across a room and things are getting distorted.
I like the idea that, if you tell the fish, what do you think about the water? The fish is not going to know what you're talking about because they live in the water, and it's impossible for you to see your own culture, your own biases, unless you're outside of it. Now we are living in this pandemic and we can't study abroad, but this will end, right? And hopefully very soon. And we're going to get an opportunity to travel again. And this is still going to be part of who we are globally. So I would love to hear a little bit from Savannah of her experience in one of our faculty-led study abroad programs, because she got to live for a whole semester in Spain, and living. We have many different types of faculty-led programs, some that include an internship, some that don't, some in which you have to speak the language, some in which you don't, some in which you live with a family, some in which you live in an apartment. In the case of the program in Spain, we have internships available there. We also, in the fall program, we have one track where students have to speak Spanish, another track in which students don't have to speak Spanish, but all of them, whether they speak or they don't speak Spanish, have to live with a family in Spain. And I think that's key. Having that opportunity it's incredible. It's similar to the program that we have in Japan, where living during that time with a family, just, where you can have your shoes or not, just teaches you so much about the way that a Japanese family sees space. Savannah, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in Spain?
Yeah, of course. I missed it already. I missed it when I left. But it was fall of my junior year. And so I went, and coming to Trinity, I guess going into college, I always wanted to study abroad. But it was hard, I guess, because the ones at Trinity required for the longest time to take 2 Spanish classes, and I didn't want to put another Spanish class on my schedule because I already was trying to double major and all this. But then I knew Dante from a business fraternity, and he was like, oh, like we just opened up a like non-English route. You don't have to have that requirement. And so I was like, oh, I'm in. Like, and I think I applied that day and was just looking forward to it from that day. And when we got out there, we all took the flight over, got there, and the first day, I guess coming from a small town in Bernie, which is called the Bernie bubble, to then going to Trinity, which is called the Trinity bubble, then going to this massive capital in Spain, Madrid, was insane. And I have a love for the arts and architecture too. So seeing that old style, like the monumentality of everything, was very just enlightening. And throughout my whole experience there, I found so many new loves of like exploring cities, listening to the podcast or not, like hearing the city around me. It was a really amazing experience to just kind of gain my independence and I guess recognize and allow myself time to reflect on my past and what I want for my future. So that was like a personal thing, but living with a host, my senora, Carmen, she was a really amazing character as well. She, I swear, was more popular than I was, where she was like out on the town and I'm like doing homework at 7 p.m. Thanks, Dante. Finding. She was very like strict, stern, but then also was like, you gotta love life. And where I was right next to the Madrid Rio. So there's a ton of dogs, a ton of people, like it was very action-y type of place. So it was a really good location and experience there. But I think just being in Europe and in Madrid, seeing how transportation works, seeing how like the job market, it was very interesting to my eye in economics to see how a different society like went through life and the challenges they face compared to here in the US, which I was used to, was a really good opportunity. And then being in Europe makes it easy also to travel to other places. So a good amount of weekends I went to Malta or Porto, and was all different languages as well. So that communication aspect, how can you get across what you want in a language that you're not really comfortable with, such as Portuguese. I mean, there's some similarities, but it's different. But I would say through that experience and kind of recognizing my own culture bias happened in Dublin. So I went to Dublin for a weekend and I stayed. It was a really funny culture mix. It was a shared Airbnb where it was the two hosts were from Brazil, which I found out Brazilians are like the third largest population in Dublin, Ireland. And so I was like, oh, like I didn't know that. And so they were there, and we had a girl from France who was staying long term. I'm American, and then one guy who was staying a night was from Poland. And to this day, this is like a really amazing memory where we were all just like sitting in this tiny little kitchen in Dublin, like drinking, eating, and having conversations just of our perspectives on the world. And the guy from Poland was like talking. I don't know I can't remember what exactly came up, but in my culture, in my background, I like right away was like, oh, like, yeah. And then I like kind of chimed in faster than, I guess maybe I didn't let him finish. And then one of the Brazilian hosts was like, oh, like, no, like calm down. Like let him speak, like it's fine. Don't be like defensive. And I was like, I guess I never noticed that, but I mean, similar to like Spanish culture, like Brazilians are very laid back, like relaxing. So he's like, let him speak. I'm like, I want to hear. I'm like, okay. Like, so I never realized I did that. I always thought I was a pretty good listener, but maybe in the American culture, I am not in other cultures. So it was a really amazing experience just to have that and recognize who I was as a person, what I wanted, and speaking Spanish.
Excellent. So as we're got a little less than 10 minutes left. For the professors, before I'm going to give each of you an opportunity to give us some final words. But before we do that, if you could quickly describe the creativity and the connection of an international education, if we haven't done that already. Either one of the professors?
Yeah, so one thing I think it's, Dante mentioned a little bit about like how diversity, and there's a research on diversity in teams, right? There's people who are interested in productivity and on creativity are asking themselves what teams make what makeup of teams makes the best group. And so the experiment was like they put groups of friends, people that knew each other, and people with a person that they didn't know, right? This is the research that's kind of starts this. And they found out that the response was that the groups that knew each other, they experienced a nicer time. They had more fun and they enjoyed the interactions. But when it came to the solutions, the teams that had less fun, were a little bit awkward, they didn't know each other, came up with better solutions, right? That they were more accurate and on the mark. And so I think that's a finding from the 80s or 70s. It's an old finding, right? So that opened the door for a lot of stuff to kind of explore on this route. And so the question is like, why is it that these diverse teams bring better solutions to the table? And so there's many hypotheses out there, and I think that it's that issue of points of view, as we were talking about, like a culture. There's a certain thing like a mental shortcut, right? Like the first when we see this, that we react this way because it always works in the U.S., right? At HEB, if somebody's coming your way, you move to the right, and they let them pass. That always works. Go to England or Japan where they drive on the other side. That doesn't work, right? But it's these and I'm using simple examples, but the actual things are a little bit more complicated. This ability to think of the world and how it works in a different way from the other people is for us thinking outside the box, right? And that the box for us is that cultural box, right? We know how things work within this box. And so the person who is not from your same background has a different cultural box. And so when they see the problem, they're likely to see or be able to imagine different solutions. And I think that's the real valuable thing. And something I really like about the US is that it's a country that does really well, with a lot of problems, right? Like with a lot of caveats, but in comparison to other countries that are monocultural, the US is leveraging a lot of cultures here, and we are enriched by the immigration that we have. I'm convinced by this, right? The idea that, on my kitchen table, I not only have ketchup, but I also have salsa and soy sauce, right? Just makes my food right better, right? In many ways, right? And it's that thing, right? Each culture is bringing a different tool to the table. And so to the degree that we don't find ways to work and interact, we are limiting ourselves. And so we need to learn how to work with each other and learn to value the perspectives of other people. These other perspectives are going to be the solution, right? In combination with our approaches are going to bring to this solutions. So, when I think about the big challenges that we have, that we face both nationally and internationally, I'm very optimistic about the future, and I get to see the people that are going to be finding the solutions for these. And I'm really proud of the little role that we got to play of like helping them, be open to other ideas. But I know that they're going to be, tackling all these problems and be able to find solutions that work long term.
Interesting. Thomas, I'm going to give you a minute to kind of wrap up your experience with all of this before we end.
All right, yeah, sure. Basically, I'd say that my experience was an unexpected opportunity to grow beyond where I would have otherwise. Um, Unlike Savannah, I never studied outside of the United States, and that's just something that would have completely passed me by, and I might not have even known how much I was missing until I got lucky enough to take part in Dante's program for international finance. And as a result, my world's expanded. I can have conversations with people that I didn't before. I learned more about the material that I was studying. I've got 5 new friends who I'm really fond of. And just in general, my world is bigger and smaller at the same time. It's bigger in the sense that there's more possibility. It's bigger in the sense that I just am aware of more. And it's smaller in the sense that all those things that make it big have been brought to me in a way that makes it feel more comfortable. I'd really encourage everybody who can fight to get into the class, fight to take part in programs like this, because it's just so rare that you have opportunities, especially in the era that we're in, to do something this special.
Excellent. Professors, anything before we start to wrap up?
Let me add there, Carla. I think Thomas said it really well, and Katsuo was talking about the interconnections that we make with other people. I think all of us have mentioned that today, but I want to, with fear of sounding a little too, new agey, I'm going to speak for a second about the soul, and I believe that we're born with a soul, and it has so many possibilities, and then inadvertently, somehow our lives, our people around us, without trying to hurt us, sort of like tell us who we are. You are this. This is the person that you are, right? And you grow up in a particular town, in a particular setting, in a particular family with, like the people that surround you just define you in one way or another. So when you have an opportunity to study abroad or meet people from other places, I think that takes away barriers from yourself that you did not know that you had, and allows you for an opportunity to just kind of imagine for a second, if that same soul that you are had been born in a different country, how would you have been differently? And in that moment, I feel like your soul expands. You come back from a study abroad experience, or even a COIL experience where you interacted with people from a different place, and all of a sudden, your own town looks different. Right, like the place where you grew up and knew is like all of a sudden is like I had not realized that things were a little too rigid potentially in one way or another. So back to what Katsuo was saying of America being the land of opportunity and the business of America being business, that opportunity to each one of us as individuals be broader in the way that we defined ourselves. I think it's a lifelong experience that really is transformational, that really makes you be a better person and have a much more enriched career. And I think it's also an opportunity to build your self-confidence, to say, I'll take that challenge, right? Like I know that it's going to be difficult. I know that I've had moments where I trip on people in the way that I speak or something like that, but I was able to overcome that. And I'm ready to have more experiences like that.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for this. This really wraps up our hour, which I think went by really quickly. I want to thank Dr. Katsuo Nishikawa Chavez from Trinity Center for International Engagement, Dr. Dante Suarez, Associate Professor in Trinity School of Business, Finance, and Decision Sciences, Savannah Clarke, Trinity graduate student, and she's also an alumna of ours, and also Thomas Kasierski, a Trinity finance student who will be graduating this May. Thank you all for taking the time to be with us today. If anybody who's watching would like more information on intercultural learning, we're going to ask you to please email Gina Pham, that's Pham, in the Center for International Engagement. Gina's email is gpham@trinity.edu, or you can go on the Trinity webpage and look up our Center for International Engagement. So thank you all so much for being with us. We'll see you next time on another one of our Trinity Expert Series here on the Tiger Network. Thank you.